Welcome back to the Barbell Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum. Hope you had a great week. On this podcast, episode 286, we're going to take a deep dive into what happens to physical fitness as people age. Specifically, what happens to strength as we get older and what can we do about it? Now, this is an important consideration worldwide as the population is getting older. For example, between 2019 and 2050, the number of persons aged 65 or over is projected to more than double, while the number of children under 5 is projected to remain basically the same. By 2050, there will be 1.5 billion people aged 65 or over, which will outnumber adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 24 and be more than twice as many older persons as children under 5. Now, the aging process can lead to various changes in the body of the older individual, which can negatively impact their health, their quality of life, and fitness due to the loss of muscle mass, muscle strength, and cardiorespiratory endurance. In this podcast, I'm going to first focus on some of the mechanisms underlying the loss of muscle size and strength. Then, I'll take you through some of the experimental data involving training in sport to see what this means in real life. Finally, I'll make some practical recommendations for training expectations and management for older trainees. All right, let's first start off with some mechanisms. We'll start with the muscles themselves. One relatively recent finding is that older individuals tend to be more anabolically resistant than younger individuals. Now, anabolic resistance means that in response to stimuli that would otherwise cause the muscle to grow, such as lifting weights and eating dietary protein, the increases in muscle protein synthesis and suppression of muscle protein breakdown are blunted in older individuals when compared to younger individuals. Now, short-term studies on this are difficult to interpret because atrophy, strength loss, and power loss are more insidious and take longer to capture. Also, short-term changes in muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown are not necessarily predictive of long-term outcomes that we care about. Longer-term studies using deuterium oxide, or heavy water, can be administered to research subjects, and it will incorporate into the skeletal muscle protein, which can be used to measure protein turnover over longer periods of time, and this does in fact show reduced anabolic stimulus in response to both dietary protein and resistance training in older individuals as compared to younger individuals. Now, the mechanism of anabolic resistance, or mechanisms, are an area of active research. It was originally thought that perhaps the absorption and resulting levels of amino acids in the blood after a protein-containing meal, that's termed hyperaminoacidemia, well, that's thought that it was less in older folks due to an absorption or digestion problem. Well, this can be true in individuals with medical conditions like celiac disease or Crohn's. These are diseases of absorption. Recent data shows that protein absorption and the resulting levels of amino acids in the bloodstream are similar to younger individuals, suggesting against this as being a major mechanism. Now, it was also thought that the decrease in muscle protein synthesis that older individuals sometimes have was in response to an impaired blood flow compared to younger individuals, which would thereby limit delivery of amino acids to the muscle. However, this has turned out to not be well supported by the research either. Rather, there seems to be something going on at the cellular level that tends to generate a reduced muscle protein synthesis response and greater muscle protein breakdown activity. Indeed, there are multiple lines of evidence showing that multiple mediators of the pathways that produce muscle protein synthesis are blunted in older individuals. In addition, there may be a contributor from lower levels of satellite cells and reduced satellite cell activity in older adults. Now, satellite cells are effectively stem cells for the muscles, and they are heavily involved in muscle fiber regeneration and repair. It's not clear exactly that decreased satellite cell content and activity play a role in anabolic resistance, as this is also a relatively new area of research. A number of other processes occur involving anabolic muscle signaling with aging, such as an increase in fat deposition in the muscle itself, which may increase insulin resistance at the level of the muscle and also inflammation. High levels of insulin resistance and inflammation can both reduce muscle protein synthesis and allow for increased levels of muscle protein breakdown. Outside of anabolic resistance, there are other factors that play a role in the loss of muscle mass and strength with aging. Likely the king of all associated factors is reduced physical activity. Now, resistance training was not included in the first set of guidelines from the American College of Sports Medicine in 1978, but was added in 1990, where they recommended one set of 8 to 12 reps of moderate intensity resistance training exercises performed at least 2 times per week per muscle group. Now, the guidelines have expanded since then to include even more resistance training, but they've been around for about 30 years. Unfortunately, this hasn't resulted in a large uptake in lifting weights in the population who could use it the most, and these are older people. While the prevalence of meeting the muscle strengthening guidelines among U.S. adults has increased from 17.7% in 1998 to 27.6% in 2018, that's across all adults, only about 18%, or less than 1 in 5 adults over the age of 65, are currently hitting those same guidelines. Now, we know that reduced exercise, especially resistance training, reduces stimulus to maintain and improve muscle function, while also increasing age-related anabolic resistance, ultimately leading to a non-uniform loss of strength and size. In this case, non-uniform means a greater loss in strength than muscle size. For example, in one study, a group of older adults who lifted weights for 6 months, then stopped lifting weights for another 6 months, showed an increase in strength of nearly 50% at the end of the training period, followed by a loss of about 20% strength during the period of detraining. Now, muscle cross-sectional area did not change over the course of the study. A recent meta-analysis on older adults who were previously untrained and then lifted weights regularly for periods of 2 to 6 months and then stopped, while muscle size loss wasn't significant until about 6 months later, despite losing strength after a month of detraining. So in general, there is a non-uniform loss of strength and size that is related mostly to the time spent not lifting weights. As the period of detraining goes along, more strength appears to be lost, though this is nuanced. For example, maximal power or high velocity strength appears to decrease less over time than maximal low velocity force production, signifying that a loss of muscle power may be worrisome, indicating a bigger decline in muscle function. Another thing that happens with age is a loss of muscle fibers and motor units. Now, the motor unit is a single nerve and all of the muscle fibers it connects to. The nerve has its cell body in the anterior or ventral horn of the spinal cord, and in post-mortem examinations, there are fewer of these motor nerve cell bodies in the spinal cord, about 30% less in those over the age of 75 compared to younger individuals. In general, when we lose a muscle fiber and it becomes disconnected from a motor nerve, it's highly susceptible to atrophy and loss unless it's rescued by another motor nerve nearby. As long as this process carries on, there's generally little effect on muscle size or strength, but when the rescue can no longer keep up with the losses, muscle size and subsequent strength tend to suffer, and this is one of the underlying processes in sarcopenia. While much has been made of hormonal changes from aging, as it is said that an age-related decrease in testosterone causes an age-related decrease in muscle size and strength, I wouldn't be so sure about that. For example, multiple large recent studies have shown that older and younger men have similar testosterone levels, provided that the older individuals were healthy and active. In other words, any apparent age-related decline in testosterone levels is likely not due to chronological aging per se, but rather the accumulation of medical comorbidities that sometimes increase with age, such as obesity, diabetes, etc., resulting in lower testosterone levels. Now, testosterone levels can be viewed as a reflective marker of general health. We would expect levels to be generally lower in those with health conditions compared to those without. Yes, age is a risk factor for many disease processes, making older individuals likely to have lower testosterone levels and, due to anabolic resistance, reduced muscle function. However, it is unlikely that reduced testosterone levels are causal of the reduced muscle function outside of individuals with confirmed hypogonadism. For all of your testosterone-related questions, I've linked all 4 of our podcasts that we did on testosterone in the description below. Now, many studies have found that aging tends to reduce muscle mass starting around the 4th decade of life and accelerating thereafter. That's the 30s for people counting at home. And in subjects who are relatively healthy but who don't exercise, this looks like the loss of muscle mass is about 0.4 kilograms per decade in women and 0.8 kilograms per decade in men, with the loss in the lower body being slightly higher than the upper body. However, the loss in muscle size may not correlate well with muscle strength, as age-related decreases in strength are far greater than the decline in muscle mass. In one study where they followed over 3,000 healthy men and women aged 70 to 79 for 5 years, their muscle strength went down by an average of 16% in men and 13% in women, whereas muscle size went down by an average of 5 and 3%, respectively. Loss of both strength and size were worse in those who lost weight compared to those who maintained weight or gained weight, but weight gain didn't seem to prevent strength loss significantly either. In general, muscle strength significantly decreases after 50 to 60 years of age or so, and the rates of decline are approximately 2 to 4% per year. Again, these decreases aren't due to only the decrease in muscle mass, but also neural mechanisms like reduced nerve firing rates, conduction speed, and even uncoupling of the nerve excitation and muscle contraction mechanisms. Now, in these studies, the subjects observed were not typically engaging in any sort of formal exercise, especially lifting heavy weights. We know that skeletal muscle has a remarkable capacity to adapt to the demands imposed of it, a process known as muscle plasticity. For example, one study showed that there was an increase in muscle fiber force production with resistance training in even the oldest of old subjects, 87 to 90 years old. Now, if exercise can improve muscle fiber force production in a nonagenarian, can it prevent loss of strength with aging? Probably not if it doesn't include resistance training. For example, one study showed that over 5 years, individuals in their late 50s to early 60s who used running as their primary mode of exercise, but not resistance training, well, they lost 5% of their peak isometric muscle strength in their legs, despite no changes in fat-free mass. A recent meta-analysis, including 14 studies, over 1,000 subjects, with an average age of 70, showed that lifting weights in a progressively loaded manner increased strength, as demonstrated by an average leg press 1 rep max increase of 25%, along with an increase in bone mineral density. The same study showed that age had no significant effect on the positive change in strength or bone mineral density. This is similar to another 6-month study in a group of untrained men and women aged 19 to 78. Now, in that study, strength increased by an average of 21% and hypertrophy improved by about 5%, though there was a wide range of results. Importantly, neither the age nor the sex of the individual influenced their strength or hypertrophy response. Rather, individual results varied based on other factors, likely genetic in origin. Another study corroborates this data. There was 49 subjects aged 20 to 76, and for 8 weeks, they did 4 sets of 4 with 85 to 90% of their 1 rep max on leg press. They did it 3 times a week. The average strength increase was 24%, and again, there was no differences based on age or sex. Now, going back to the meta-analysis, it also showed that higher training frequencies, higher volume, and higher load training seemed to have the largest effects of strength and bone mineral density. Another meta-analysis on resistance training programs in older adults found a similar relationship between training volume. In this analysis of 31 studies and 1,744 subjects with an average age of 68 who were doing resistance training programs for 6 to 24 weeks, well, the higher volume programs continuously resulted in more strength gain. This was particularly true during studies of longer duration. Now, it should be noted that training volume can be modified by changing the frequency. For example, you could do 1 set of squats on 3 days or 3 sets of squats on 1 day, and that would be the same amount of weekly volume, but done at different frequencies. Now, similar to other studies investigating the effect of training frequency, well, it had little to do with training outcomes independently of training volume, even in older individuals. All of this suggests that older individuals likely retain enough muscle plasticity to respond well to resistance training, gaining similar amounts of relative muscle strength and size to younger individuals. It is possible that individuals with frank anabolic resistance may have blunted responses due to processes that cannot be reversed, such as certain disease states, for example, but overall age doesn't seem to play a large role in reduced response to exercise. Still, we don't have a lot of good data on what happens over time to strength and size in those who are training across a lifetime. In other words, we assume that because age doesn't seem to predict how well someone will respond to a strength training program, and that this type of training tends to increase muscle strength and size in nearly everyone once the programming is right, well, we think we can do 2 things. 1, improve a previously untrained individual's strength at pretty much any time of their life, and 2, stop or slow down muscle strength loss that's associated with aging. What we don't know, however, is whether or not we can stop strength loss completely, not only in previously untrained individuals who are older, but also in trained individuals who have been lifting for a long time. A recent question on our forum asked, when does the loss of strength become out of your control? In other words, if you kept training throughout your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on, how long could you keep improving your strength or even maintain it? Or how about a 50-year-old who starts lifting and gets much stronger? Could they maintain their strength into their 70s or beyond? Peak powerlifting and weightlifting performance by age has been studied, with significant differences observed for different weight classes, specific lifts, and genders. On average, though, peak performance was around 35 years old for powerlifting and 26 years old for Olympic weightlifting. A similar powerlifting-only study showed a similar result, with peak performance for powerlifting being in the late 20s to early 30s. However, these data sets are cross-sectional in nature, ergo they're looking at strength performance of different people at different ages, not how an individual competitor's strength changes over time. Now, a brand new study actually did this, where they looked at changes in strength over time in a large retrospective sample of powerlifting athletes. Using the open powerlifting dataset, the researchers pulled over 35,000 records on nearly 7,000 athletes ranging from under 18 to over 70 years of age to see how their strength changed over time. For completeness, the researchers restricted their analysis to only IPF-sanctioned meets where lifters completed a full meet. That means they did the squat, bench, and deadlift and did not bomb out, meaning that they failed all their attempts for a single lift and subsequently were disqualified. So to be included in their analysis, an athlete had to compete 3 times at a minimum. The researchers found that on average, competitors saw relatively rapid strength progression during their first year, about 7.5 to 12% gains over that first 12 months. And that increased to a total of about 20% after 10 years. Females had steeper increases or more rapid gains in strength, probably due to a lower starting strength, and there was reduced strength gain observed with increased baseline age. However, there was still a positive improvement in strength performance until about M3 and M4 for men, which are the cutoffs for 60 and 70-year-old classes, respectively. Now, there were 4 competitors in the M4 dataset who showed an average decline of 5% strength over 14 years. Interestingly, the women's strength kept improving in the M3 and M4 divisions, with 5% and 2.5% improvements observed in these groups, respectively. Now, to me, This suggests that while peak strength performance in a relatively sterile sport like powerlifting is likely to occur in an individual's 30s if they started training much earlier, well, people who start later can keep getting stronger for a long time. Now, people who have trained for strength are also apparently able to maintain their strength for relatively long periods of time, perhaps into their 50s, though people who start in their 50s might not reach their peak strength until much later. Taken together, it seems like legitimate strength training is likely to reverse most of the typical age-associated changes in muscle function that we see in those who don't exercise. Unfortunately, most people don't lift weights, and those who would benefit from it the most, that is older individuals, especially women, do it even less. Again, less than 1 in every 5 adults over the age of 65 in America lifts weights, and of that, men are almost twice as likely to do it. If we factor in people with various medical conditions, who again would benefit from lifting weights the most, the participation rate really needs a kick in the pants. Now, lifting weights is pretty much something that everybody who is able to do so should do, but we should especially encourage folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond to do so. We should also probably encourage these folks to consume a bit more protein in order to combat the potential underlying anabolic resistance due to aging, insufficient activity, and underlying health conditions. It's not much more protein, about an extra 40 to 50 grams per day or so for most in order to get over that 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day mark. Now, combining a bit more protein with an intelligent lifting program that includes a variety of different exercises to train all of the major muscle groups through long ranges of motion, using a variety of different rep ranges at relatively challenging intensities at a relatively high volume that the person can tolerate, well, that's a good recipe for a DIY anti-aging cocktail, if you ask me. All right, that's it for this episode of the Barbell Medicine Podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and leave us a 5-star review. Have a great week. Talk to you next time.